Hi, I'm Michael Sahota, author of Leading Beyond Change and co-creator of the Self Framework. It's a way to help understand how do we move organizations from traditional organizations that function in very static ways that have been in place for hundreds to thousands of years to organizations that adapt, evolve, can keep up with the pace of change. And we mapped out the whole journey. I'm not going to go into the details here. What I do want to talk about is multi-team alignment. The reason I'm talking about this is one kind of bellwether problem that most organizations face. So, for example, if we have multiple teams, let's draw them here. Could be 5 teams, could be 17 teams, doesn't really matter, different groups. Now, it's actually really good to have each group functioning largely autonomous on its own, where it's really running its own customer delivery, its own customer service, and so on. However, it's also very important to understand that when we just optimize locally, the global optimum will actually fall. This is a very important lesson from Lean. So, what we want to do is create a world where there's a local optimization that happens, but people are only doing that not at the expense of the global optimum, not expense of what's best for the whole department or the whole organizational system. Now, there are a couple of key challenges I want to just walk through here. This is a really important problem because in traditional organizations, we struggle with this. We go from too centralized, where it takes too long to innovate and adapt, towards too distributed, where we can innovate and adapt quickly, but it's hard to keep up with standards and keep coherence that we need in the organization for the groups to work together. And the answer is there is no best thing. What is best is for an organizational system to evolve itself to solve the challenges that are in place that are blocking the delivery of customer value, not just locally, but globally as well. So let's talk about what the big challenges are. The first challenge is that for teams to work together, which is ideally what we want to have happen, what's actually required for teams to work together is that they actually have a handle on their own delivery. So most teams cannot learn how to work effectively together because they're actually not fully addressing their own internal challenges. And the big challenge there is really what I call a learning culture. A lot of organizations do not have teams that are learning, that are on an ongoing basis, daily, weekly, monthly, improving how things happen. And when that happens, the production capability actually tends to go downward and downward, and things get slower and slower over time. So the first step is actually to create a system where, in an environment where each of these teams are learning. And, again, how do you get them to change? Well, the answer is that when we start to use authority to make change, we might get compliance, but we can't actually make that happen. What we do is we start to create an environment where change becomes possible, where we give supports for developing a learning culture. And so let's imagine we have 2 of our teams that have done this. They've looked after their own internal challenges and they're functioning better. At that point, these teams can start to explore, how do we interoperate? How do we support each other better? How do we move towards coherent standards that will allow us to share resources, share people, and function to serve the greater purpose and goals of our organizational system? Now, how does that happen if each group is running their own profit and loss or their own customer-focused outcomes? Well, the answer is we create a shift in the incentives. So oftentimes we set up the environment so that people are in me thinking. I'm focused on me, my outcome, my bonus, my team, my department, my group. And what we want to do is move people to we thinking. So oftentimes, we can start to create this shift. I mean, this is a very deep shift because we're all rooted in our egoic consciousness and mindset, and it's actually the core of what happens as human beings. But we can start to create this shift by setting the expectations. For example, if at this current point in time, groups are incentivized based on their local goals and their success, and let's say they get a bonus based on that, that'll encourage me thinking. Whereas when the incentive-based system or how people are rewarded is based not just on themselves, but on the whole group, they're going to start to move towards we thinking. The system will support a shift in that direction. So this is how, instead of trying to go directly and make changes and get people to do things, we want to start working as leaders to create an ecosystem where the desirable behaviors that we want start to emerge. All right, so let's imagine we've done that. And now these teams have or groups have an incentive for working together. They're going to start to interoperate. Now, you say, well, wait a second, but I really want to have standards across my whole group. Well, as each team starts to solve their internal challenges and is able to start interoperating with others, over time, what will happen is eventually there'll be a coalescing of standards across the whole group that will allow the whole group to elevate its overall functioning. So what we're describing here is a very natural challenge that organizations have. Now, oftentimes when you have very disparate groups with doing different things, there's this desire to impose standards, to make things the same. Now, the challenge with that is that's very characteristic of this traditional thinking. And what it does is it creates standards, but often at the expense of the local innovation that we actually want to have to serve better customer outcomes, to allow people to function actually more effectively. So there's no right answer, because as we move towards more evolved organizations, we get really comfortable with paradox, with understanding that there are going to be tensions, some that pull us in one direction, some that pull us in another, and we need to start figuring out a way to navigate that in a way that involves people. Now, if you haven't already picked this up, everything that I'm saying here is about how we help people move from, we can call this theory X, theory X to theory Y. That really, as a leadership system, we want to move people from feeling disengaged, demotivated, and so on, to people who are feeling engaged, motivated, passionate about what they're doing. And so what I've just been describing you about an approach to move a group towards higher levels of alignment to create a global optimum is how to do that in a way that only builds more engaged people. So at the end of the change program, people are more excited, more engaged than they were at the start. Now, it may be the case that there's some people here, some groups that don't want to collaborate because of their leadership. Their leadership stuck in very traditional ways of thinking and so on, and they're not ready to make changes to their own behavior to create a learning culture, to interoperate with other groups. At that point, really, there's a couple of choices. Well, first of all, when we take a slow and time-based strategy where we slowly expand based on teams that are willing and ready, what happens is over time, more and more leaders will come on the journey. They may not be ready right now, but given time, they'll be ready. Or they'll see where things are going and they'll say, hey, can I just get a package because I see where things are going and I want part of it. And it's a way to increase really the survival rate and the ability to take everybody on the journey as we move from a traditional way of working to a more evolved one that will yield more engaged workers, higher performance, and so on. So that's all I wanted to share for today. If you're interested in having a conversation, please reach out to me. Thanks so much.